Today, we are diving deep into one of the most ruthless, but let's be honest, one of the most effective principles from the playbook of power, Law 26. Keep your hands clean. We're going to explore how the powerful manage to look perfect, even when their actions are, well, anything but. Think about it. In the high-stakes game of power and ambition, things are bound to get messy. Mistakes happen. Tough calls have to be made. And sometimes those calls are ethically gray. So how do the most successful people seem to just float above it all? How do they stay spotless while everyone else is getting dragged through the mud? That's the core problem that Law 26 is all about solving.
Okay, so the law's judgment is really built on one powerful idea. Perception is everything. You have to project this flawless image of being competent, efficient, and totally moral. But of course, the reality of gaining and holding power often involves some dirty business. So the real art is making sure none of that dirt ever touches you. And the law gives you a two-part toolkit for this. The scapegoat, for when you make a mistake, and the cat's paw to do the dirty work for you in the first place.
All right, let's break down that first tool, the scapegoat. You can think of this as your get-out-of-jail-free card for any screw-ups. The idea is brutally simple. When you mess up, you find someone else to take the fall. This isn't about taking responsibility. It's about pure, calculated deflection. The law basically says you should always have someone in mind ready to play this role. Now, this idea of a scapegoat isn't new. It's ancient, and it's wired deep into our psychology. The name itself comes from an old Hebrew ritual where, to cleanse the community, a priest would symbolically place all the people's sins onto a goat and then banish it to the wilderness. It works today for the same reason it worked back then. We humans have a deep need to find a simple reason for complicated problems. It's just easier to blame a single person than it is to understand a complex failure. A scapegoat gives us an easy target for all our anger. To really see this in action, let's go back to 2nd century China and a general named Cao Cao. He was a brilliant military mind, but he made a huge mistake. He was laying siege to a city and completely miscalculated how much food his army would need. Rations got dangerously low, and his troops were starting to whisper about mutiny. This timeline just shows you how fast and ruthless Cao Cao was. He knew that saying, "Oops, my bad," would be seen as weakness, and he couldn't afford that. So he calls in his commissary chief, the guy in charge of supplies, and tells him in this incredibly chilling phrase that he needs to borrow his head to fix a problem. The next day, the totally innocent chief is publicly executed for a crime he didn't commit. And just like that, the soldiers had their villain. The anger disappeared, the mutiny was avoided, and Cao Cao looked like a strong, decisive leader. And this quote right here, it just perfectly captures the cold, hard logic behind this law. For Cao Cao, sacrificing an innocent man was just a simple calculation. One man's life was a small price to pay to maintain his own power and keep his army together. It's brutal, for sure, but as the story shows, it was undeniably effective. Okay, so let's look at an even more strategic, more complex use of the scapegoat, with the infamous Cesare Borgia. It's the early 1500s, and Borgia has to bring order to a region of Italy called Romagna. It was total chaos, run by petty, cruel rulers. But if he just marched his army in, he'd look like just another tyrant. He needed a much smarter plan. Borgia's plan was nothing short of a 4-step masterpiece of psychological warfare. First, he picks this notoriously cruel guy, Ramiro de Orco, and gives him total power to do whatever it takes to crush the lawlessness. And de Orco does his job, brutally and effectively, and naturally, the people come to hate him. Then, once the dirty work is done and the region is stable, Borgia pulls off the most brilliant move. He turns on de Orco, setting himself up as the hero who will save the people from the very monster he unleashed. And this was the grand finale. It was pure theater. Borgia didn't just fire de Orco. He had him arrested, cut in two, and left his body in the middle of the town square for everyone to see. In one shocking, horrifying move, Borgia accomplished everything. He got credit for restoring order, and he got to look like the people's savior who punished the bad guy. His own hands? Perfectly clean. De Orco took all the blame and all the blood. It's a textbook case. The famous political thinker Niccolò Machiavelli actually saw this happen, and he understood exactly what Borgia was doing. This gruesome spectacle left the people both shocked and, weirdly, satisfied. They got what they wanted, order and a sense of justice, or at least revenge, and Borgia, he got their absolute loyalty.
This is the big lesson here. A scapegoat isn't just a shield, it can be an incredibly powerful weapon to push your own goals forward. Okay, now let's shift gears to the second part of the law, the cat's paw. So if the scapegoat is for cleaning up a mess after it happens, the cat's paw is about not even making the mess yourself. This is the art of getting someone else to do your dirty, dangerous, or unpopular work for you. The name actually comes from an old fable. There's a monkey who wants chestnuts that are roasting in a fire, but he doesn't want to get burned. So what does he do? He spots a cat, grabs its paw, and uses it to pull the chestnuts out of the flames. The monkey gets the tasty reward, and the cat gets a burnt paw. In the game of power, you always want to be the monkey, never the cat. And if you want to see a true master of the cat's paw strategy, you have to look at Cleopatra. When she was a young queen in Egypt, she was surrounded by enemies, including her own brother and sister, who both wanted her throne. If she just had them assassinated, her people would have been horrified and she looked like a monster. She needed someone else to fight her battles. Her skill was just extraordinary. Look at this. To get rid of her brother, Ptolemy, she seduced and allied herself with Julius Caesar, who then, oh so conveniently, went to war with him and defeated him. A few years later, to get rid of her sister Arsinoe, she just whispered into the ear of her new lover, Mark Antony, and he ordered the execution. I mean, think about the sheer audacity of it. She turned the two most powerful men in the world into her personal hitmen, her cat's paws, all to secure her own throne. And all the while, she looked completely blameless to her people. So how does all this ancient history apply to our lives today? You don't have to be a Roman general or an Egyptian queen to see this law working all around you. These principles are in play every single day in offices, in politics, and even in our personal lives. In the modern world, this law is really about the art of disassociation. You see it constantly. A CEO needs to announce massive layoffs. Do they do it themselves? Of course not. They send in the head of HR or maybe an outside consultant. That's the cat's paw, to deliver the bad news. When a big project fails at a company, it's usually the project manager who gets fired, the scapegoat, while the senior executive who approved the flawed plan is nowhere to be seen. The pattern is always the same. You find other people to do the dirty work and take the blame, so you can associate yourself only with the good news and success. But, and this is a really, really important warning, this is an incredibly dangerous game to play. This law can blow up in your face, and when it does, it's spectacular. Using scapegoats and cat's paws takes a huge amount of skill and subtlety. If you're clumsy, it will backfire. The biggest danger is getting caught. Think of yourself as a puppeteer, hiding behind a screen. As long as the audience is focused on the puppets on stage, your scapegoat, your cat's paw, you're safe. But if that screen ever falls and everyone sees you pulling the strings, all that anger that was directed at the puppets doesn't just transfer to you, it multiplies. You instantly become the ultimate villain of the whole story. And a perfect tragic example of this is Catherine de' Medici in France. As you can see here, she tried to use a rival family as a scapegoat for an assassination she planned, but the plan failed. The assassin only wounded the target, who lived just long enough to point the finger at her. Suddenly, her manipulation was exposed. Paranoia exploded, and the whole situation spiraled into the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, a horrific bloodbath that started a civil war. In her attempt to keep her hands clean, she ended up getting them, and the entire country, drenched in blood. This image is a final, kind of chilling metaphor. The cat's paw is a tool, but it's a tool with claws, and that makes it dangerous. When you use people this way, it always comes at a cost, not just to them, but to you. To be able to do this effectively, you have to develop a kind of emotional distance that, over time, can really chip away at your own conscience. And that leaves us with this final, unavoidable question. This law, without a doubt, offers a brutally effective way to maintain an image of power and skill. But you have to ask yourself, what's the real price of that spotless image? Is a perfect public reputation really worth the moral burden of knowing that you put the blood, whether it's real or metaphorical, on somebody else's hands? That's the ultimate trade-off that Law 26 forces you to confront.